So you've probably heard whispers of energy healing, right? Maybe seen it popping up in, well, unexpected places, even hospitals. Or you've stumbled across terms like chakras and Qi online. But what is this stuff, really? And, the big question, does it actually work?
It's a huge topic.
It is. So today, we're doing a comprehensive deep dive into the world of holistic energy healing. We've really dug into a fascinating stack of sources, in-depth analyses, research papers, historical accounts, to try and distill the essence of these practices for you.
Yeah, there's a lot there.
Our mission really isn't to convince you one way or the other. It's more about giving you a clear, balanced understanding its principles, the practices, what science says, and importantly, how people are actually using it right now.
Kind of a shortcut through the noise.
Exactly. Think of this as your shortcut to truly getting what holistic energy healing is all about, from, ancient wisdom to modern science. And we've got an incredible guide here today to help us navigate it all.
Well, it's a truly captivating journey. And what I find particularly compelling is this intersection, how ancient philosophies are meeting contemporary science.
Right.
It creates this really rich tapestry of understanding. And I think this deep dive will really help us see those nuances clearly.
Okay, let's unpack this right from the start then. Before we even get into specific techniques like Reiki or acupuncture, we need to grasp the foundational idea behind all of this, the holistic paradigm. What actually sets this approach apart? Why is it so different?
That's a great place to begin because it really is a profound shift in perspective. Holistic healing essentially treats you as an integrated whole.
Okay.
Mind, body, emotions, spirit, all interconnected. It's not about just isolating a symptom, say back pain, and treating just that.
Right, like taking a pill for the pain.
Exactly. It's about restoring balance across all facets of your being. This is often where people have that first kind of aha moment, realizing it's about more than just the physical body.
So if I'm getting this right, it's about recognizing that, say, emotional stress or even spiritual distress isn't just in your head, but can literally show up as a physical problem.
Yeah.
And maybe the other way around, too.
Precisely. That interconnectedness is one of its core principles. An imbalance in one area, well, it inevitably impacts the others.
Make sense?
Then there's the principle of balance and harmony. Health is seen as maintaining this internal equilibrium, this balance. And disease is basically seen as prolonged imbalance.
Okay, so health is balance, illness is imbalance.
Pretty much. Another key principle is self-responsibility and empowerment. You're viewed as an active participant in your own healing journey.
Not just passively receiving treatment.
Right. The practitioner is more of a guide. And finally, personalization and prevention. Treatments are ideally tailored to your unique needs, and there's a really strong emphasis on preventing disease before it even starts.
So it's a very different framework. It puts you, the individual, more in the driver's seat.
It really does. It's about recognizing your innate capacity to heal when everything, mind, body, spirit, is in harmony. And what's truly striking is how consistent these core ideas are across incredibly diverse traditions, worldwide.
Really?
Yeah. This foundational idea of interconnectedness, it naturally leads to the concept of a vital life force.
Wow. Okay, Qi and Prana, that sort of thing.
Exactly. It's believed to be this fundamental animating energy that flows through and around us, governing our well-being. You'll hear terms like Qi or Qi from traditional Chinese medicine, Prana from ancient Indian traditions, or even just life force energy in more Western context. They're all essentially pointing to the same underlying concept, this vital energy that animates all living things.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So we're talking about ideas that go back thousands of years, way before modern science. Could you give us a quick flyover of how these emerged in different cultures?
Absolutely. Take ancient India's Ayurvedic tradition we're talking millennia ago. This energy is called prana.
Prana.
It's described in really old revered texts like the Bhagavad Gita. It's believed to flow through these energy channels called nadis.
Nadis.
And concentrate in chakras or energy centers throughout the body. You've probably heard of chakras.
Yeah, definitely.
And yogic practices like pranayama, which is breath control, were specifically developed to manage and enhance this prana flow.
Okay, so that's India. What about China?
Right. So in traditional Chinese medicine, or TCM, which is also thousands of years old, it's entirely founded on the concept of qi.
Qi, got it.
Ancient Chinese texts document its principles, describing qi as the force powering all physiological processes, and it flows through distinct pathways known as meridians.
Meridians, okay. Yeah, heard of those with acupuncture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then fast forward to more contemporary Western contexts, there have been attempts to kind of reframe this metaphysical concept for scientific research. That led to the idea of the biofield.
Biofield, what's that?
It's described as a hypothetical, massless human energy field, sort of an energy field extending beyond the physical body. It's an attempt to make the concept potentially researchable.
Interesting. So looking at the bigger picture then, it sounds like there's a fundamental difference in how holistic healing sees the body compared to, let's say, conventional Western medicine. Can you break down that distinction for us? Because it seems pretty key.
It's a crucial point, yeah. It really highlights a fundamental difference in epistemology, like how we know, what counts as evidence.
Okay.
The holistic approach, as we've said, focuses on the whole person. It tries to investigate root causes, emphasizes individualized treatment plans, and really prioritizes prevention.
Right, the whole system.
The conventional Western approach, on the other hand, is built on modern science. It examines the body in, biophysical and biochemical terms. It excels at acute conditions, emergencies, infections, using standardized treatments like pharmaceuticals and surgery. You could almost describe it as molecular reductionism.
So conventional medicine tends to break things down into their smallest parts to understand them, like focusing on the molecules or cells.
Precisely. It shines in crisis intervention by zooming in on those parts. Holism, though, asserts that the whole is actually greater than the sum of its parts.
Okay.
And this divergence, this difference in viewpoint, is exactly what fuels a lot of the skepticism and the ongoing debate around energy healing today. It's a clash of paradigms, really.
Right, that makes sense. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. We have these core principles, this idea of a life force. How do these practices actually come about and how have they changed over time? Because it's clearly not just one monolithic thing, is it?
Not at all. It's incredibly diverse.
Yeah.
Many of the most influential energy healing modalities have their roots deep in these ancient, really sophisticated systems from Asia.
Like TCM?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Traditional Chinese medicine. TCM is a great example. It's a complete healthcare system, thousands of years old.
Wow.
Its principles are well documented in classical texts, like the Yellow Emperor's Classic, and it's built entirely on achieving balanced flow of qi through those meridians we mentioned.
Right.
And its techniques are incredibly varied. Acupuncture, acupressure, Qigong, Tai Chi, herbal medicine, Tuina massage. It's vast.
Okay. And then you mentioned India.
Yes. Ayurveda and the yogic traditions from ancient India, they're centered around prana flowing through the nadis and being regulated by the 7 main chakras. Practices like yoga postures, the asanas, breath control, pranayama, and various forms of meditation are all designed specifically to balance this prana.
It's really remarkable to think these aren't just alternative therapies, but genuinely ancient, complex systems of medicine and well-being.
Absolutely. They have millennia of history and development behind them.
So how did these ideas then translate or adapt into the modern era? What did that revival look like in, say, the last century or so?
That's a fascinating transition. In the 20th century, we saw a significant modern revival and, importantly, adaptation of these concepts. Take Reiki, for instance.
Okay, Reiki's pretty well known now.
It is. It's probably the most widely practiced modern form of energy healing. It was developed by Mikao Usui, a Japanese Buddhist, around 1922.
Right.
The story often told is that he rediscovered these ancient Buddhist techniques during a pretty intense 21-day fast and meditation retreat.
Wow.
It was later systematized by Dr. Chujiro Hayashi and then brought to the U.S. by Hoyo Takata. Now, interestingly, some historical digging suggests Takata might have, let's say, modified parts of the origin story for Western audiences.
Really? Why?
Perhaps to make it more palatable, more accessible, less tied to a specific religion for the American audience at the time. That happens sometimes with cross-cultural transmission.
Interesting. And what else emerged in the 20th century?
Well, then, in the early 1970s, you get another significant development with Therapeutic Touch, or TT.
Therapeutic Touch, okay.
This was developed by Dolores Krieger, who was a nursing professor, and Dora Kunz, who is described as a clairvoyant.
An unusual pairing.
Yes, but their explicit goal was actually quite practical, to create a teachable, secular, that was important and standardized laying on of hands practice that could be integrated into nursing.
Ah, so making it acceptable for hospitals.
Exactly, and they framed it using that Western concept we mentioned earlier, the biofield.
That is a huge leap, isn't it? From ancient spiritual traditions to a standardized nursing practice, framed by this biofield idea.
It is indeed.
What about other things people often associate with energy healing? like using sound or crystals.
Hmm.
Where do they fit into this history? Are they ancient too?
Oh, absolutely. They weave through many cultures and eras. Sound healing, for instance, is truly ancient and incredibly widespread. You see evidence of it in ancient Egypt with ritual chanting,
Hmm.
in India with Nada yoga, which uses mantras and music specifically for healing. In various indigenous and shamanic traditions, you find drumming and rattling used for trance and healing.
Right.
Even in ancient Greece, Pythagoras reportedly explored soul adjustments through specific musical intervals and harmonies.
Fascinating. And crystals, they seem really popular now.
They are, and crystal healing also has incredibly deep roots. The Sumerians were using crystals in magic formulas over 6,000 years ago.
Wow.
Egyptians used them extensively in amulets for protection and health. Jade was, and still is, highly prized in China. Amethyst was associated with sobriety in ancient Greece.
So ancient uses, how does that connect to modern practice?
Well, what's interesting about modern crystal healing is that it's often syncretic,
Syncretic, meaning...
meaning it blends elements from different traditions. Modern practice often combines these ancient uses with concepts like the chakras, which come from Hindu and Buddhist traditions,
Okay.
and then assigns specific stones to these chakras based on their purported energetic properties, like color or perceived vibration.
That brings up a really important point, doesn't it? When these ancient practices get repackaged or adapted for new modern audiences, like secularizing TT for hospitals or using crystals with the chakra system, what are the potential upsides and downsides? Does something get lost?
It's a critical question, absolutely. On one hand, adaptation makes these practices incredibly accessible. It broadens their reach far beyond their original cultural or spiritual contexts.
Which is good, presumably. More people can benefit.
Potentially, yes. But on the other hand, this adaptation can sometimes decontextualize them. It might strip away some of the original depth or the intricate philosophical frameworks they were part of.
Like taking a piece out of a puzzle.
Kind of.
Yeah.
For example, modern crystal healing, while very popular, often applies the chakra system to stones in ways that might differ quite significantly from how those stones were historically used in their cultures of origin.
Right.
And this very adaptation, while making them appealing and user-friendly, can also make them more vulnerable to scientific criticism. The underlying frameworks might appear inconsistent or lack the sort of rigorous internal logic found in their parent systems like TCM or Ayurveda.
That makes sense. It's a trade-off between accessibility and maybe authenticity or depth.
It often is, yes. It's something to be aware of when exploring these practices.
Okay, so with that incredible historical context, let's zoom in now. What do these practices actually look like when you go for a session? We're clearly talking about a whole spectrum here, right?
Mm-hmm.
From something quite tangible like acupuncture needles to perhaps more intuitive or abstract approaches like maybe some forms of energy work.
Indeed. And what's fascinating is how each modality, even though it's rooted in this concept of energy, manifests in really distinct ways in practice. Let's start with Reiki, which you mentioned is very widespread.
Okay.
Its name, Rei and Qi, basically means universal life energy. We know it was developed by Mikao Usui in 1922, systematized by Hayashi, brought to the West by Takata.
Right.
The methodology itself is very non-invasive. You remain fully clothed, usually lying down comfortably, maybe sitting. The practitioner acts essentially as a channel.
A channel for the energy.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
They direct this energy through their hands, which are placed either lightly on the body or sometimes just above it, often following a sequence of around 15 prescribed hand positions, covering major organs and energy centers.
Okay, and the goal?
The goal is generally understood as clearing energetic blockages, restoring balance, and allowing your body's own innate self-healing capabilities to function better.
And I've heard about attunements with Reiki.
Yes, that's a central part of the training. The attunement is a ritual performed by a Reiki master intended to open the student's energy channels so they can effectively channel Reiki energy themselves. There are different levels, level 1, level 2, which introduces symbols and distant healing, and level 3, or master teacher level.
Okay, so that's Reiki. What about those meridian-based therapies we touched on earlier, like acupuncture and Qigong? How do they work in practice?
Those are cornerstones of traditional Chinese medicine, focused on that concept of Qi and meridians. With acupuncture, the core theory is that illness arises from imbalances or blockages in the flow of Qi within the meridians.
So, like traffic jams in the energy highway.
It's a good analogy, yeah. By stimulating specific points, known as acupoints, along these pathways, practitioners aim to restore the smooth, balanced flow of Qi.
And how do they stimulate them? Just needles.
Mostly, yes. The methodology involves inserting incredibly fine, hair-thin, sterile needles into specific locations among the over 2,000 identified acupoints.
2000. Wow.
It's a very detailed map of the body's energy system. The needles might be gently manipulated by hand, or sometimes a very mild electrical current is applied through the needles. That's called electroacupuncture.
Okay.
And related practices, also working with meridians and points, include acupressure, which uses finger pressure instead of needles,
Right.
moxibustion, which involves burning dried mugwort herb near the skin to apply heat,
Interesting.
and cupping, which uses suction cups on the skin.
Okay, so that's acupuncture. What about Qigong and Tai Chi? They seem more like movement practices.
They are, but they're also fundamentally energy practices. Qigong literally translates to energy cultivation or energy work. Qi is energy, Gong is work or skill.
Ah.
The
Yeah.
core idea is to cultivate and balance qi within your body. Tai Chi, which many people recognize for its slow, flowing movements, is actually a specific, well-known form of Qigong.
I didn't realize Tai Chi was Qigong.
It is, yes, a martial arts form, but also deeply energetic. The methodology for Qigong in general involves harmonizing mind, body, and spirit through a combination of slow, gentle, often repetitive movements, coordinated with controlled breathing techniques and focused intention or visualization.
So mind, breath, and body working together.
Exactly. These practices can be dynamic, like the forms of Tai Chi, or they can be more meditative and stationary, focusing primarily on breath and internal awareness.
Okay, so those seem relatively structured in their own ways. What about the biofield-focused practices like therapeutic touch, crystal healing, and sound healing? They seem maybe a bit more abstract, less tangible.
That's a fair description. They operate with a different kind of tangibility, perhaps.
Let's take therapeutic touch, TT, the one developed by nurses in the 70s.
Right.
It's based on the theory that humans are open energy systems, and health depends on a balanced energy field or biofield. Illness, therefore, is seen as blockages or imbalances within this field.
Okay, makes sense within that framework. How is it done? The methodology is quite unique because there's typically no direct physical contact.
No touching.
Usually not. The practitioner first centers themselves, gets grounded and focused. Then they use their hands, typically held a few inches away from your body, to assess your energy field. They might sense variations, areas that feel hot, cold, dense, tingling, staticky.
Interesting. And then?
Then they use rhythmic, often sweeping or combing motions with their hands, again without touching, to unruffle or smooth out the perceived imbalances in the field, intending to restore harmony and flow.
Okay. What about crystal healing? How does that work?
With crystal healing, the core theory generally involves the idea that crystals have stable, specific vibrational frequencies,
Okay.
and that these frequencies can interact with the human energy field, or perhaps the chakras, through resonance. The idea is they can help clear blockages, absorb negative energy, or amplify positive energy.
And how are they used? Just holding them.
The methodology varies, but commonly the practitioner places specific crystals directly on or around your body, often aligning them with the chakra points.
Right.
The choice of crystal is typically based on its purported properties, maybe its color, its crystalline structure, or traditional associations. For example, rose quartz is very often used for emotional healing or opening the heart chakra, amethyst for relaxation and intuition.
And how did they know which crystal to use? Is there a manual?
There isn't really a single standardized directory like you'd find for herbs and TCM, for instance. The choice is often described as intuitive, based on the practitioner's training, experience, and assessment of the client's needs. People also wear crystals, meditate with them, or place them in their environment.
Okay. And finally, sound healing. How does that fit in?
Sound healing's core theory is quite fundamental. Everything in the universe vibrates at a natural frequency, including our own bodies, organs, cells.
Right, the idea of resonance.
Exactly. And the theory is that sound vibrations from external sources can influence the body's own vibrations, helping to restore harmony when things are out of balance. It's also believed that specific frequencies can entrain brainwaves.
Entrain brainwaves.
Yeah, coax the brain into certain states like relaxation, alpha waves, or meditation, theta waves.
How is it done? Just listening to music?
It can be that simple, but often it involves specific instruments known for their resonant qualities. Things like Tibetan singing bowls, crystal bowls, gongs, chimes, tuning forks. These are often used to create immersive sound baths.
Sound baths, I've heard of those.
It can also involve using the voice through practices like vocal toning, making sustained vowel sounds, or chanting mantras. And modern variations include things like binaural beats.
Binaural beats.
Yeah, where you listen through headphones to two slightly different frequencies, one in each ear. Your brain actually perceives a third frequency, the difference between the two, as a rhythmic pulse or beat. And this perceived beat can supposedly entrain your brainwaves to that specific frequency.
Wow. So quite a range of methods, all falling under this umbrella of energy healing, but very distinct in practice.
Absolutely. From needles and movements to hands-off biofield work, crystals and sound waves.
That's a fantastic overview. Okay, now for the big shift. Let's take all of this, the history, the philosophy, the practices, and bring it under the, let's say, rigorous lens of modern science. This is often where the conversation gets really interesting and, well, let's be honest, sometimes a bit contentious.
It definitely is.
What's the main argument from the critical perspective here? Why is there so much skepticism?
Well, the biggest hurdle and the core of the skepticism really comes down to the argument from pseudoscience.
Pseudoscience, okay. How so?
The energy that these practices talk about, Qi, Prana, the biofield, is generally seen as metaphysical, not physical, within the current scientific understanding. It hasn't been verifiably detected or measured by scientific instruments in a way that's consistent and replicable.
So science can't find it, basically.
Not in the way it measures, say, electromagnetic fields or heat. Organizations like the National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health, NCCIH in the U.S., they often point to a lack of robust, high-quality studies and explicitly question the existence of a measurable human energy field as described by these therapies.
Right.
And this leads to these practices often being classified as pseudoscience, or at least biologically implausible, within that conventional scientific framework. The proposed mechanism just doesn't fit the current model.
Okay, so if the scientific community generally finds the core mechanism implausible, then any positive effects people report must be coming from somewhere else, right? What are the alternative explanations critics usually offer?
Exactly. Critics often point to the very powerful role of placebo and other psychological or contextual mechanisms.
The placebo effect. We hear that a lot.
We do, and it's genuinely powerful. Benefits can arise simply from the belief that a treatment will work. But it's not just placebo, there's also the therapeutic context itself.
What do you mean by that?
Think about the typical energy healing session. It's usually in a calm, quiet, supportive environment. There's often gentle touch, or at least focused, compassionate attention from a practitioner.
Right, it's usually quite relaxing.
Precisely. That whole experience can induce a profound relaxation response. And that physiological response alone can significantly reduce stress, anxiety, muscle tension, even the perception of pain. So the benefit might come from the ritual and the relationship, not necessarily the specific energy manipulation.
Okay, so placebo, relaxation response.
Wow.
Anything else?
Well, there's also confirmation bias. If you're invested in a practice, if you believe it will help, you're naturally more likely to notice and remember the positive changes and maybe downplay the times it didn't seem to work.
Makes sense. We all do that to some extent.
And beyond those explanations for perceived benefits, many of the actual research studies on energy healing face significant methodological critiques.
Like what kind of flaws?
Common issues include small sample sizes, which make it hard to draw firm conclusions. There are major difficulties with blinding. I mean, how do you blind a Reiki practitioner to whether they're giving real Reiki or sham Reiki? It's almost impossible.
Good point.
Designing adequate controls is also really tough. What's a believable sham treatment for acupuncture or TT? And then there's the issue of selection bias or publication bias, the tendency for studies with positive results to get published more often than those with negative or null results, which can skew the overall perception of effectiveness.
Okay, so that's a pretty strong case from the skeptical side, which raises the really important question. If the mechanisms are considered implausible, and there are all these alternative explanations and study limitations, why are so many people still reporting benefits? Let's dive into the actual clinical evidence. What do the studies, especially the big reviews, actually show?
This is the heart of what some call the evidence paradox, and it's where the picture definitely gets more nuanced. We need to look closely at the data, keeping those critiques in mind. Let's start with Reiki. A fairly recent meta-analysis, published in 2025 actually, looked at 11 randomized controlled trials with over 600 participants. It found a statistically significant, albeit small, improvement in quality of life for people receiving Reiki compared to control groups.
Small, But significant. Interesting.
Yes. And this analysis suggested that maybe longer interventions, like 8 or more sessions, or perhaps very brief acute interventions, around 20 minutes, seemed to be most effective. Other individual studies have suggested benefits for reducing anxiety and pain, for instance, in cancer outpatients or women after C-sections.
But there's always a but, isn't there?
Well, it's important to note balance. A 2015 Cochrane review, and Cochrane reviews are generally considered very high quality, found insufficient evidence to say whether Reiki was effective for treating depression and anxiety specifically. So the picture is mixed.
Okay, mixed for Reiki. What about acupuncture? That seems to be one of the most researched ones.
It absolutely is. There's a huge amount of research. A major 2020 Cochrane review focused on chronic low back pain. It found that acupuncture provided clinically important improvements compared to no treatment or usual care.
Okay, so better than doing nothing.
Yes. However, and this is a really crucial distinction, when acupuncture was compared to sham acupuncture.
What's sham acupuncture?
Yeah.
Needles that don't go in?
Exactly, or using needles on non-acupoints. When compared to sham, the review found that real acupuncture did not provide a clinically significant additional benefit for pain or function.
Wow. So that suggests.
It strongly suggests that placebo effects, or maybe those contextual factors we talked about, are playing a very large role in acupuncture's effectiveness, at least for chronic low back pain. However, it's not the whole story. A 2024 review by the International Association for the Study of Pain acknowledges the large evidence base for acupuncture in various pain conditions and notes its low-risk profile. And there are proposed Western mechanisms.
Like what?
Things like stimulating the release of the body's natural painkillers, endogenous opioids, modulating pain signals in the brain, or having local anti-inflammatory effects. So the scientific conversation about how it works is definitely still ongoing.
Fascinating. Okay, what about Qigong and Therapeutic Touch?
For Qigong, a 2024 systematic review looked at 9 randomized controlled trials. It found a significant reduction in perceived stress when Qigong was compared to no treatment groups.
Better than nothing for stress, then.
Yes. Interestingly, though, there wasn't a significant difference when Qigong was compared to other active control groups, like general exercise.
So maybe as good as exercise for stress, but not necessarily better.
That's what this review suggests, though some secondary outcomes in those studies did point towards improvements in depression and anxiety symptoms as well. Now, Therapeutic Touch, TT, the hands-off nursing practice, has notably weaker evidence supporting it. A 2007 Cochrane review, specifically looking for evidence for anxiety disorders, found 0 eligible randomized controlled trials that met their quality criteria. 0. So they couldn't draw any conclusions about its efficacy for anxiety. Other studies looking at general stress or pain for TT have shown pretty mixed results, and you might remember that famous or infamous 1997 study published in JAMA by Emily Rosa.
The 9-year-old.
That's the one. Her science fair project famously showed that experienced TT practitioners couldn't detect whether her hand was hovering over theirs any better than chance. That casts significant doubt on the claim of sensing a human energy field.
Right, I remember that. Okay, so TT looks shaky. What about sound and crystals? My sense is the research there is maybe even more varied or less existent.
You're right. Sound healing, often studied under the broader umbrella of music therapy, actually has some decent evidence, particularly for mood. A 2020 meta-analysis pooling data from 55 trials found a significant reduction in depressive symptoms with a moderate effect size.
Moderate effect, that's notable.
It is. And interestingly, that review noted that music medicine, which basically just means listening to recorded music prescribed for therapeutic purposes, seemed to have an even stronger effect than therapist-led music therapy sessions sometimes. A 2017 Cochrane review also found short-term benefits for depression with music therapy.
So music is good for us.
Yeah.
Not exactly shocking, but good to have the data.
Exactly. Now, crystal healing, that's where you see a pretty conspicuous absence of high-quality research.
Right. Lots of anecdotes, not much science.
That's generally the case. The scientific consensus, for now, is that crystal healing falls into the category of pseudoscience, and any perceived benefits are largely attributable to the placebo effect and the relaxing supportive context of receiving a treatment, rather than any intrinsic property of the crystals themselves.
Okay, so this really highlights that central tension we keep coming back to. We see some practices like maybe acupuncture for some pain or Reiki for quality of life or sound music for mood, showing some positive clinical outcomes. But the scientific community struggles to explain how they might work through conventional biological or energetic means. How are researchers trying to bridge that gap? What are the emerging scientific frameworks, even if they're still speculative?
That's where things get really cutting edge and sometimes, yeah, more controversial. One prominent framework that attempts to bridge this is the biofield hypothesis.
You mentioned that earlier.
Right. It posits that all living organisms possess a subtle, perhaps electromagnetic field, and that illness represents a disruption in this field, with healing aiming to restore harmony. Science does acknowledge that the body generates measurable electromagnetic fields. Think of an ECG measuring the heart's electrical activity, or an EEG measuring brain waves.
Okay, so there are measurable fields.
Yes, and building on this, some research in biophysics and electromagnetism has explored whether practitioners might interact with these fields. For instance, there was a study back in 1992 by a researcher named Zimmerman using a very sensitive magnetometer called a squid. He found that the hands of practitioners engaged in energy healing emitted low-frequency electromagnetic waves, sometimes in the 7-9 Hz range, which overlaps with alpha and theta brainwave frequencies associated with relaxation and meditation.
Interesting. Suggesting a possible influence through resonance.
That was the suggestion, yes. A possible physical mechanism, although it's still debated and needs more research.
What else is being explored? Anything more out there?
Well, yes. More speculatively, some theories delve into quantum biology and non-locality.
Quantum, like quantum physics.
Exactly. Concepts like quantum entanglement, where particles seem instantaneously connected and influence each other regardless of distance, have been, very speculatively, proposed as a potential explanation for phenomena like distant healing.
Wow, okay. That sounds pretty far out.
It is highly speculative. Similarly, the idea of biophoton emission, the faint light that cells naturally emit, has been discussed as a possible form of intercellular communication that might be influenced by a practitioner's intention. But it's really crucial to stress these quantum theories are far from proven in the context of energy healing. They're mostly theoretical proposals at this stage.
Okay, so quantum physics might be a leap too far for now. If we strip away some of the more abstract or unproven ideas, what's the most scientifically grounded, plausible explanation for why people consistently report feeling better after many of these practices?
The most robust and probably most widely accepted scientific explanation really points to the role of the nervous system in homeostasis.
Okay, back to the body's own systems.
Exactly. Many of these practices, regardless of their specific methodology or theoretical underpinning, whether it's Reiki, meditation, gentle Qigong, even just receiving compassionate touch, seem to powerfully induce a relaxation response.
The opposite of fight or flight.
Precisely. This activates your parasympathetic nervous system, what we often call the rest and digest system. When this system is engaged, it physiologically slows your heart rate, lowers blood pressure, reduces stress hormones like cortisol, decreases inflammation markers,
All right.
and generally promotes homeostasis, which is your body's natural tendency towards balance and self-regulation. In essence, these practices seem to create a profound psychophysiological intervention. They create the internal conditions that support your body's innate capacity for healing and repair.
So the experience itself triggers a healing state.
That seems to be the most scientifically solid explanation for many of the observed benefits, yes. So you have the central tension. Some positive clinical outcomes, particularly for subjective measures like pain and quality of life, for practices whose proposed energetic mechanisms remain unproven.
Yeah.
Skeptics attribute these outcomes primarily to placebo, context, and the relaxation response. Proponents continue to explore potential subtle energy mechanisms or look to new scientific frontiers like quantum biology. The pragmatic middle ground seems to be acknowledging that the practice of energy healing, the experience it provides, can be a powerful intervention, regardless of the exact mechanism.
Okay, that's a really helpful framing. So knowing all this, the philosophy, the history, the practices, the complex scientific debate, how are people actually using these practices in their daily lives right now, and where are we seeing them pop up, maybe beyond just dedicated wellness centers?
Well, it's increasingly common for people to turn to these approaches, often alongside conventional medicine, for chronic conditions that maybe aren't fully addressed by standard treatments, especially conditions involving persistent pain, high levels of stress, and that really intricate mind-body interplay.
Like managing chronic pain, how are they used there?
Acupuncture is probably the most recognized one for pain, used widely for things like chronic back pain, migraines, osteoarthritis. The belief, both traditional and sometimes Western adapted, is that it stimulates nerves, muscles, and connective tissue, potentially leading to the release of natural painkillers or modulating pain signals.
Right.
And then mind-body practices like yoga, tai chi, even therapeutic massage, which sometimes incorporates energy concepts, can be incredibly helpful. They work by relaxing tense muscles, reducing those stress hormones that can amplify pain, and improving flexibility and body awareness. And you hear so many personal accounts now, especially with what's sometimes called neuroplastic pain, that seems rooted more in sensitized brain and nervous system pathways rather than ongoing tissue damage.
Right, where the brain's alarm system is stuck on.
Exactly. People report finding profound relief through these mind-body approaches that help retrain the nervous system.
That makes a lot of sense. And what about stress and anxiety? You mentioned the relaxation response. Are these practices primarily used for that?
Right. They are fundamentally powerful stress reduction techniques, absolutely. Modalities like Reiki and sound healing, for example, seem particularly adept at inducing deep relaxation, which, as we discussed, demonstrably lowers cortisol and activates that rest and digest parasympathetic state.
Okay.
Reiki, in particular, offers this unique, non-verbal, safe space. For some people dealing with emotional pain or anxiety, that lack of need to talk can be incredibly beneficial. There are certainly case studies and anecdotal reports supporting its use for emotional release.
Right.
And then, of course, practices that you can easily do yourself, like mindfulness meditation, focused breathing exercises, simple diaphragmatic breathing, or that alternate nostril breathing we might talk about later. These directly calm the nervous system and give you immediate tools for managing stress in the moment.
So it's not just about symptom relief, is it? It sounds like it goes deeper.
Often, yes. Beyond just managing symptoms like pain or stress, many people use these practices for enhancing their overall emotional and spiritual well-being. They find it improves their general quality of life
That's so.
by strengthening that mind-body connection, fostering greater self-awareness and introspection. People often report benefits like finding more inner peace, feeling a stronger spiritual connection, whatever that means to them, developing greater emotional resilience, or even finding a deeper sense of purpose in their lives.
What's really fascinating to me here is how this pragmatic focus on patient outcomes, feeling better, coping better, seems to be driving integration into mainstream settings, even while the scientific debate about how it works continues.
Absolutely. We're seeing a real growing acceptance, or at least tolerance, of these practices within mainstream health and wellness.
Where specifically?
It's quite remarkable, actually. Some estimates suggest over 900 hospitals and medical clinics across the USA, UK, and Australia now offer some form of energy healing. Reiki seems particularly prevalent.
Wow, 900. Even in major hospitals.
Yes, often as part of their integrative medicine or palliative care programs, you see prominent, well-respected institutions like the Cleveland Clinic, Johns Hopkins Hospital, the Mayo Clinic, Dana-Farber Cancer Institute.
Really? Places like that.
Yes, they've all incorporated these kinds of services to varying degrees. In these clinical settings, they're primarily used as complementary therapies, meaning alongside, not instead of, conventional medical treatment.
Okay. For what kinds of things?
Common applications include helping patients manage the side effects of chemotherapy, like nausea or fatigue, alleviating preoperative anxiety or postoperative pain, providing comfort and support in palliative care settings.
So focusing on patient comfort and well-being.
Exactly. There was a well-known study, for example, conducted at Hartford Hospital some years ago. It suggested that surgical patients who received Reiki alongside standard care needed less anesthesia, experienced less bleeding, reported less pain requiring medication, and actually had shorter hospital stays compared to controls.
That's significant.
It is. Studies like that, combined with patient demand, have led many hospitals to create dedicated healing services or integrative medicine programs.
That's a huge shift in thinking. So as we look ahead, maybe towards 2025 and beyond, what do you see as the next big trends in this whole area of holistic wellness?
I see several key directions emerging. One is definitely towards greater personalization, often aided by technology. Imagine integrating biometric data from your smartwatch or other wearables with holistic interventions to create truly tailored wellness plans.
Interesting. Like tracking stress levels and suggesting specific meditations?
Something like that, yes. Telehealth and virtual healing are also exploding, naturally. Remote energy healing sessions, online guided meditations, digital platforms, creating communities for support that's only going to grow.
Makes sense. What else?
I think we'll see continued mainstream interest in the integration of ancient practices like Ayurveda and TCM. More people incorporating things like acupuncture or Qigong into their regular wellness routines, not just seeing them as alternative.
Okay.
There's also a growing awareness, particularly among consumers, around ethical and sustainable sourcing for wellness products. People are asking, where did this crystal come from? Was it mined responsibly? Is the packaging sustainable?
That's a good point.
And finally, corporate wellness programs are increasingly incorporating these kinds of tools, offering mindfulness training, meditation sessions, maybe even things like energy clearing workshops to help employees manage stress and improve well-being.
So this pragmatic acceptance is really being driven by things like patient satisfaction, the generally low-risk profile of these therapies, and their ability to complement conventional care.
Exactly. And that boosts their legitimacy in the eyes of the public and fuels the growth of the entire wellness economy, often quite independently of whether the scientific debate about the precise mechanism gets resolved anytime soon.
Okay, so if you're listening to all this and your curiosity is definitely piqued, maybe you're thinking, I want to explore some of these practices for myself. How do you navigate this space safely and effectively? Because, as you've hinted, this field is largely unregulated. Being an informed seeker seems crucial.
Absolutely essential.
Where should someone even start when trying to find a qualified practitioner?
Due diligence is key. I always recommend starting with word-of-mouth referrals from trusted friends or family who've had positive experiences. Seeking professional referrals from other complementary therapists you might already trust. Maybe a licensed massage therapist, a chiropractor, an acupuncturist can be a good route.
Okay.
Community resources like local yoga studios or wellness centers often have bulletin boards or no practitioners. And as we just discussed, increasingly you can find practitioners working within clinical settings, like hospitals with integrative medicine departments. That often implies a certain level of vetting.
Right. Are there directories or professional organizations?
Yes. There are professional directories for specific modalities. For instance, if someone was interested in the Universal Healing Tao system, which involves Qigong and meditation, they could look for certified instructors listed on official websites. There's an instructor named Hristo Galbachov in Bulgaria, for example, listed on their site. That kind of resource exists for many established lineages.
Good to know. So, say you find someone who looks promising. What are the really crucial questions to ask before you commit to a session? How do you vet them effectively?
Excellent point. Treat it like an interview because you're potentially entering into a therapeutic relationship. First, ask about their training. What is your training and lineage? How long were your classes or programs?
Looking for depth, not just a weekend certificate.
Exactly. For Reiki specifically, ask about the different levels they've completed and how much time they spent practicing between levels. You want someone who has invested time in practice. Then ask, how long have you been practicing professionally? What is your clinical experience, especially with issues similar to mine?
Experience matters.
It does, and very importantly, how do you describe what you do? What can I expect in a typical session? Listen carefully to their explanation. Does it resonate? Does it sound grounded?
What should you watch out for in their answer?
Be genuinely wary of anyone who makes grand promises of a cure, especially for serious conditions, or anyone who disparages conventional medicine or tells you to stop seeing your doctor. That's a huge red flag.
Right. It should be complimentary.
Ideally, yes. And perhaps the most telling question, the one I always recommend asking, do you have a daily self-practice?
Why is that one so important?
Because it reveals whether they're truly living the principles they teach. Someone with a dedicated personal practice, whether it's meditation, Qigong, self-Reiki, usually has a much deeper embodied understanding and commitment than someone who just learned techniques in a workshop. It shows they walk the talk.
That's a brilliant tip. Okay, so someone finds a practitioner they feel good about, they book a session. What can they actually expect to feel during the session? I imagine it's incredibly subjective.
It is highly subjective, absolutely. First, the environment is usually designed to be quiet, peaceful, and safe. You'll typically remain fully clothed, either lying comfortably on a massage table or sitting in a chair.
Okay, and the sensations?
It really runs the gamut. Some people feel absolutely nothing unusual during a session, and that's perfectly okay. Others describe a wide range of sensations. Warmth, tingling, coolness, a sense of energy moving like currents, maybe heaviness or lightness.
So no right way to feel it.
Not at all, but the most common report by far is simply a feeling of deep relaxation, sometimes incredibly profound, like drifting off without quite falling asleep.
Okay. Anything else people might experience?
It's also not uncommon for emotional release to occur during or after a session, maybe unexpected tears, laughter, or just a sense of release. Sometimes people report having sudden insights, clarity, or vivid imagery. Again, it's very individual.
Good to know it's possible.
Yeah.
Now, what if someone isn't ready to see a practitioner or they want to supplement sessions with their own practice? You mentioned self-empowerment as a core principle. Are there simple things people can try at home?
Absolutely. That principle of self-empowerment is key, and you don't need any prior knowledge or special skills to try some basic yet really powerful self-healing practices at home.
Okay, like what? Can you walk us through a couple?
Sure. A great place to start is with a simple guided meditation for self-healing.
How does that work?
First, just find a comfortable position where you won't be disturbed, maybe sitting or lying down. Close your eyes gently and take a few slow, deep, intentional breaths to settle yourself.
Okay.
Now, just become aware of your breath, feeling the support of the chair or floor beneath you. Then begin to visualize a bright, healing light. It could be golden, white, or maybe a soothing color like green or blue. Imagine this light represents pure healing energy, love, peace.
Visualizing the light. Got it.
As you inhale, imagine breathing this healing light directly into your body, letting it spread through you. As you exhale, imagine you're releasing any tension, discomfort, pain, or negative energy. Maybe visualize it as gray smoke effortlessly leaving your body.
Inhale healing, exhale tension.
Exactly. And if there's a specific area of your body that needs attention, maybe an area of pain or discomfort, gently direct that healing light specifically to that area. Imagine it soothing, repairing, and bringing balance. Just continue this focused breathing and visualization for maybe 5 or 10 minutes. When you're ready, slowly bring your awareness back to your surroundings.
That sounds incredibly calming and accessible.
Oh.
What about something focused more on emotional well-being, like cultivating compassion?
For that, loving kindness meditation, also known as metta meditation, is wonderful. Again, find a comfortable, settled position. Gently bring your focus to your heart area. First, you offer loving kindness to yourself. Silently repeat phrases like, may I be safe, may I be healthy, may I be happy, may I be peaceful and at ease. Really try to feel the intention behind the words.
Okay, starting with self-compassion.
Yes, that's crucial. Then, picture someone you care about deeply, a loved one, and extend those same wishes to them. May you be safe, may you be healthy. Next, bring to mind a neutral person, maybe someone you see casually but don't know well, like a shopkeeper, and extend the same wishes to them.
Extending outwards.
Exactly. Then, if you feel able, and only if you can gently bring to mind someone you have difficulty with, cautiously extend the wishes to them. If it feels too intense, just return your focus to yourself or the loved one.
That's a safety tip.
And finally, you expand your focus as wide as possible to all beings everywhere without exception. May all beings be happy. May all beings be safe. May all beings be free from suffering. It's a beautiful practice for cultivating connection and goodwill.
That does sound powerful. Now, for something that maybe works more directly with that life force idea and balancing the nervous system, you mentioned breathing earlier.
Yes, Nadi Shodhana, or alternate nostril breathing, is a classic yogic technique specifically for calming the mind and nervous system and balancing energy flow.
Alternate nostril breathing, how do you do that?
Sit comfortably with a nice, tall spine. Let your left hand rest comfortably. Bring your right hand up towards your face. You can fold your right index and middle fingers down towards your palm. This is called Vishnu Mudra, leaving your thumb, ring finger, and pinky extended. You'll use your thumb to gently close your right nostril and your ring finger to gently close your left.
Okay, got the hand position.
Okay, good. Now, gently close your right nostril with your thumb and exhale completely through your left nostril.
Exhale left.
Then, keeping the right nostril closed, slowly and smoothly inhale through your left nostril.
Inhale left.
Now, close your left nostril with your ring finger, release your thumb from your right nostril, and exhale slowly and completely through your right nostril.
Exhale right.
Then, keeping the left nostril closed, inhale slowly through your right nostril.
Inhale right.
Finally, close your right nostril again with your thumb, release your ring finger from your left nostril, and exhale fully through the left.
Exhale left. Back to the start.
That's one full cycle. Inhale left, exhale right, exhale left. Just continue this cycle for maybe 5 or 10 rounds, keeping your breath smooth, slow, and effortless. Always finish the practice by completing the exhalation through the left nostril. It's incredibly balancing.
I can already feel how that might calm things down.
Okay.
One more maybe? For people who like a bit more movement, perhaps some simple Qigong.
Absolutely. Simple Qigong movements are fantastic for coordinating breath with gentle movement to consciously cultivate that Qi, that life force energy.
Okay, what's a basic one?
Well, always start with a gentle warm-up, maybe some slow shoulder rolls, gentle spinal twists, or hip circles, just to loosen up. Then a fundamental movement is often called opening the gates or something similar.
Opening the gates. I like that.
Stand with your feet about shoulder width apart, knees slightly bent, very relaxed. As you inhale slowly, raise your arms gently out to the sides and then float them up overhead. As you exhale slowly, let your arms float down gently in front of your body, returning to your sides. Just repeat this maybe 3 times, really coordinating breath and movement.
Okay, simple and flowing.
Another one, maybe a bit more dynamic, is punching with glaring eyes. Sounds fierce, but it's good for liver energy, according to TCM. Widen your stance a bit. As you exhale, make a loose fist and gently punch forward, opening your eyes wide with focus, not anger, just focus. As you inhale, draw your fist back towards your hip. Alternate sides.
Punching with glaring eyes. Got it.
And maybe one more. Harmonizing heaven and earth. Stand shoulder width again. As you inhale, float your arms up in front of you to about shoulder height, palms facing down. As you exhale, gently press your palms down as if pressing down on water, simultaneously bending your knees slightly and sinking your weight, feeling grounded. Repeat that maybe 6 to 10 times, feeling the connection between the sky above and the earth below.
Harmonizing heaven and earth. Lovely.
And always close your Qigong practice consciously. Maybe bring your hands to rest gently over your lower abdomen, the area called the dantian, considered an energy center. Breathe deeply there for a few moments, feeling the energy settle. You can even gently rub your belly in a circular motion. It helps integrate the practice.
Fantastic. Those are really practical things people can try. Wow, what an incredible deep dive this has been.
It really has covered a lot of ground.
We've truly spanned millennia, haven't we?
Yeah.
Like these really ancient philosophical concepts of vital life force all the way to modern hospital applications and really peeling back the layers of the scientific inquiry and also personal experience. So after all that, what does this all mean for you, the listener? I think it's crystal clear that holistic energy healing is a vast, complex, and multifaceted field.
Mm-hmm. Definitely not one simple thing.
Right. And while its proposed energetic mechanisms at Qi or biofield remain scientifically unproven by current methods and face very valid critiques, the clinical evidence does seem to suggest that many of these practices can indeed offer measurable benefits, particularly, it seems, for improving quality of life, helping manage chronic pain, and significantly alleviating stress and anxiety.
Yeah, those subjective outcomes often show improvement.
And the most robust explanation, the one that seems to stand up best to scientific scrutiny right now, often points back to their profound ability to activate your body's own natural relaxation response, that parasympathetic state. It's a powerful psychophysiological intervention in itself, promoting your innate capacity for healing.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it really underscores, I think, a crucial shift that's happening slowly but surely in healthcare. There's an increasing prioritization of patient-centered outcomes, focusing on comfort, coping, and overall well-being, not just curing disease.
Right, treating the person, not just the condition.
Exactly. And these therapies, being generally low-risk, non-invasive, and focused on comfort and relaxation, they really meet that growing demand. They seem to effectively bridge ancient wisdom about holistic well-being with very modern needs for stress reduction and patient empowerment. So perhaps this raises an important question for you, listening right now, to consider. How might embracing a broader perspective on your own health, one that truly honors that intricate and inseparable connection between your mind, your body, and your spirit, how might that transform your own journey toward well-being?
That's a powerful question to end on.
Whether that exploration involves seeking out a qualified practitioner who resonates with you, or maybe just simply exploring some of those powerful self-healing practices we discussed, meditation, mindful breathing, gentle movement, the path to a more integrated sense of health is deeply personal and I think truly endlessly fascinating.